The road stretched endlessly ahead, a black ribbon snaking through the dark woods. It was late, much later than anyone should be driving, but Jake had no choice. He had to get home. The day had dragged on longer than expected, filled with meetings and paperwork, and now the clock read 2 a.m. He glanced at the dashboard. The needle on the fuel gauge hovered dangerously close to empty. The headlights sliced through the darkness, illuminating the trees that loomed like silent sentinels on either side. Shadows danced as the car sped by, creating an unsettling feeling that something was watching him. He shook his head, trying to dispel the thought. It was just his imagination, fueled by too many late nights and too many horror movies. As he drove, the radio crackled to life, its static filling the silence. He fiddled with the dial, searching for something to drown out the creeping anxiety. The familiar voice of the late-night DJ broke through, discussing local legends and ghost stories. Jake rolled his eyes, dismissing the tales of haunted roads and vengeful spirits. He was a man of logic, not superstition, but as the miles passed, the stories crept back into his mind. He recalled the tale of the woman in white said to roam the highways at night, searching for her lost love. Jake chuckled nervously. Just a story, he muttered to himself, gripping the steering wheel tighter. Suddenly, the car's headlights caught something on the side of the road. A figure stood there, illuminated briefly before disappearing into the shadows. Jake's heart raced. He slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching against the asphalt. He peered into the darkness, straining to see what he had just passed. Nothing. He exhaled slowly, trying to calm himself. It was just a trick of the light, he told himself. But as he resumed driving, unease settled in his gut. He glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the figure trailing behind him. But all he saw was the empty road stretching back into the night. Minutes turned into an hour, and the monotonous sound of the engine filled the car. Jake's eyelids grew heavy, and he fought to stay awake. He needed to focus. He couldn't afford to drift off. The road was winding, and the trees seemed to close in around him, creating a tunnel of darkness. Then, out of nowhere, a flash of light appeared in the distance. Jake squinted, trying to make out what it was. As he got closer, he realized it was a car parked awkwardly on the side of the road. Its hood was up, and the interior light flickered on and off like a dying star. He slowed down, curiosity getting the better of him. Was someone in trouble? Should he stop? The thought of helping someone tugged at his conscience. But the stories he had heard echoed in his mind. What if it was a trap? What if the person needed help only to lure him into danger? Jake hesitated, but the image of a helpless driver swayed him. He pulled over, the gravel crunching under his tires. He took a deep breath, trying to shake off the chill creeping up his spine, and stepped out into the night. The air was cold, and the wind whispered through the trees, sending shivers down his back. He approached the car cautiously, calling out, "Hey, do you need help?" Silence. He peered inside. The driver's seat was empty, the car's engine still running. Panic surged through him. Where had the driver gone? He looked around, scanning the darkened woods. "Hello," he called again, but only the rustle of leaves answered. Just as he turned to leave, he heard a faint sound behind him, like footsteps crunching on the gravel. He spun around, heart pounding. "Is someone there?" he shouted, but there was nothing but the shadows. Feeling the weight of dread settle in his stomach, Jake hurried back to his car. He fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking, and finally got inside, slamming the door shut. He locked the doors, breathing heavily as he glanced around. The woods felt alive, the trees swaying ominously. He started the engine and pulled away, the tires kicking up gravel as he sped off. The headlights bounced off the trees, but the feeling of being watched clung to him. He glanced in the rearview mirror again, half expecting to see someone chasing him, but the road was empty. As he drove, he tried to shake off the feeling of unease. He turned the radio back on, desperate for some distraction. But the static returned, crackling and popping, drowning out the music he craved. Frustrated, he slammed the dial, but the noise only grew louder. Then a voice broke through the static, chilling him to the bone. "Help me," it was faint, almost a whisper, but it echoed in his mind. He felt a cold sweat trickle down his back. He turned the radio off, the silence feeling heavier than before. Jake pressed his foot down on the accelerator, the speedometer climbing higher. The trees blurred past, and he focused on the road ahead. He just needed to get home. Just a few more miles. But the road twisted and turned, the darkness closing in around him. The headlights flickered, and for a moment he thought he saw the woman in white standing by the side of the road, her pale dress glowing in the darkness. He blinked, and she was gone. "Get it together, Jake," he muttered, gripping the wheel tighter. He was losing it. This drive was messing with his head. He glanced at the clock on the dashboard. 2:30 a.m. He was almost there, just a little further. The anticipation of being home made him push through the fear. He turned the radio back on, hoping for a distraction, but it was dead silent now. The silence was suffocating. He could hear his own heartbeat, the only sound in the car. The road ahead seemed to stretch on forever, and with each passing second, the shadows felt thicker, more menacing. Then he saw it again, a flicker of movement in the trees. He slowed down, squinting into the darkness. Was it the woman, or just his mind playing tricks? He felt a chill run down his spine as he remembered the stories. Just keep driving, he told himself, but the urge to look back was overwhelming. He glanced in the rearview mirror, and for a split second, he saw her. The woman in white, standing in the middle of the road, her hair wild and eyes hollow. He gasped, slamming on the brakes. The car skidded to a halt, and he stared wide-eyed, heart racing. But when he looked again, she was gone. The road was empty, but the air felt thick with her presence. Get a grip, he said out loud, trying to convince himself it was just fatigue. He took a deep breath and started driving again, faster this time. The trees seemed to close in, the darkness swallowing him whole. The road twisted sharply, and he felt a sense of dread wash over him. The headlights illuminated a sign, "Welcome to Black Hollow." He had never heard of this place. It wasn't on his route. Panic surged through him. He must have taken a wrong turn somewhere. He turned the wheel, trying to find a way out, but the road felt like a maze. Every turn led him deeper into the woods, and the feeling of being watched returned, stronger than before. He glanced at the fuel gauge. It was empty. Great, he muttered, frustration bubbling to the surface. He needed to find help, but the trees closed in tighter, the road narrowing. He felt trapped, like prey in a predator's lair. Suddenly he spotted a light in the distance. It flickered like a beacon of hope. He drove toward it, praying it was a gas station or a house where he could ask for directions. It flickered like a beacon of hope. He drove toward it, praying it was a gas station or a house where he could ask for directions. As he got closer, the light revealed itself to be an old diner, its neon sign buzzing weakly. Relief flooded him as he parked and stepped out, the chill of the night hitting him like a wave. The diner looked abandoned, but the light was on. He approached cautiously, the door creaking open as he pushed IT. Inside. The air was stale, and the smell of grease lingered. The tables were empty, and the jukebox box in the corner played a haunting melody. "Hello," he called out, his voice echoing in the stillness. No answer. He walked to the counter, glancing around. The place felt frozen in time, dust covering the surfaces. Then he heard a soft sobbing sound coming from the back. His heart raced. "Is someone there?" he asked, stepping cautiously toward the sound. As he reached the doorway, the sobbing stopped. He hesitated, then pushed the door open. The room was dark, and he could barely make out a figure huddled in the corner. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice trembling. The figure slowly turned, revealing a woman with hollow eyes and a ghostly complexion. "Help me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Jake's blood ran cold. He took a step back, realizing too late that this was the woman from the stories. No, this can't be happening," he stammered, panic rising within him. She stood up, her movements slow and deliberate. "You shouldn't have come here," she said, her voice echoing in the dim light. "You're not safe." He turned to run, but the door slammed shut behind him with a deafening bang. He was trapped. "Let me out," he shouted, pounding on the door, but it wouldn't budge. The woman stepped closer, her eyes dark and filled with sorrow. "You have to listen. They're coming for you. You can't escape." Jake's heart raced as he backed away, searching for another way out. The diner felt alive, the walls closing in around him. He spotted a window and rushed toward it, but it was sealed tight. Suddenly the lights flickered and shadows danced along the walls. He could hear whispers, soft and sinister like a chorus of lost souls. The fear consumed him as he felt the temperature drop. "Help me," the woman's voice echoed again. But this time it was joined by others, a cacophony of cries and pleas that filled the room. He stumbled back, feeling the weight of despair pressing down on him. "Get away from me," he yelled, but the shadows moved closer, wrapping around him like tendrils of darkness. He felt their cold grip on his shoulders, pulling him back. In a moment of desperation, he lunged for the door again, throwing his weight against it. It cracked open slightly, and he squeezed through, tumbling onto the ground outside. He scrambled to his feet, heart racing, and ran toward his car. But as he reached it, the headlights flickered and died, plunging him into darkness. He turned, feeling the presence of the woman behind him. "You can't leave," she said, her voice a haunting whisper. "Why are you doing this?" he shouted, backing away. "What do you want from me?" But she only stared, her eyes hollow, filled with sorrow and despair. "You're just like the others," she said softly. "You came to help, but you can't escape the curse." Jake felt a wave of realization wash over him. This was not just a story, it was a warning. He had stumbled into a nightmare, and there was no way out. The shadows closed in, and he felt their cold fingers wrap around him, pulling him down into the darkness. He screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the night. The woman watched as he disappeared, her expression one of sorrow mixed with relief. "Another soul lost to the night," she whispered, turning back toward the diner. The whispers grew louder, welcoming him into the fold of the cursed. In the distance, the road lay empty, the trees standing silent as the darkness reclaimed what was once lost. The night would continue, and the stories would live on, warning those who dared to drive too late, too far into the unknown. And somewhere, in the depths of Black Hollow, the echoes of Jake's cries mingled with the whispers of the lost, forever haunting the roads that twisted through the woods.